won't let you go until you bless me. Every night I've been reading one chapter of the Bible because my goal is to finish the Bible in a year. So I started in Genesis, and I was currently reading Genesis 32. And I was reading about how Jacob fears Esau, and then Jacob wrestles. And so basically in this chapter, to sum it up, Jacob comes back home after working under Laban for many years, and God says that he would prosper Jacob when Jacob came back to his homeland. But when Jacob arrived, his brother Esau, who he stole a birthright from, was there with 400 men ready to fight him. Jacob was with his wife and his wives and his 11 children and all of his livestock. He didn't have anything to defend himself, and he had nothing to fight with, right? And so out of an active, so first Jacob prays to God and reminds God, this is so important, Jacob reminds God of what God said. And a lot of the times we think, maybe we didn't hear God right, or maybe God just didn't hear us. But there is so much power in sitting in the presence of God and saying, God, remember what you said. Remember when you told me. If I misheard you, let me know. But remember when you said you would do this. Remember this promise you made to me. You're not a promise breaker. You're a promise keeper. You're a wonderful counselor. You say that we will be the head and not the tail, at the front and never behind. And so when God makes these promises to us, God loves to hear his word said back to him. Not only does it let God know that we're listening and that we're reading his word and that we're taking something from it, and we're not just being hearers of the word but also doers, but it also lets God know that we trust him. And so Jacob reminded God of everything he said. He said, you told me that when I came to this land that you would prosper me. You told me that you would show me faithfulness, and I know that I'm not worthy of your love and your faithfulness, but you made this promise to me, so save me from my brother's hand. And then in the next subsection, it says Jacob wrestles, and it gives this analogy of a random man who comes to Jacob and keeps fighting him and wrestling with him until daybreak. And this man pops Jacob's hip socket and still fighting him. And then this man gets to a point where he says, Jacob, I don't want to fight you anymore. Let go of me. And Jacob says, no, I'm not going to let go of you until you bless me. And then the man says, what is your name? And Jacob says, Jacob. And then the man says, your name is Israel now, because you have struggled with God and with man, and you have prevailed. And then Jacob declared, I named this place Peniel. It means the face of God, saying, for I have seen the face of God, yet my life has not been snatched away. And so that analogy might just look like, a random man came and fought Jacob. But what that analogy really was that was God, and that was God wrestling with Jacob. And I think it's a perfect example of how life completely throws us curveballs, and how life gets in the way sometimes, or just like the most random circumstances or expenses happen in our lives, and we don't know how to deal with them. We don't know what to do. And when all of these things happen, we want to throw in the towel. A lot of people give up. A lot of people sit on their bed and bed rot. A lot of people do all of these things. And I think Jacob's hip being popped out of the socket and being dislocated, but Jacob refusing to let go of this person, this man he was wrestling, is a great analogy of how life can throw curveballs at us. Life can completely break us down, get us to our knees, because your hip is the main function for your legs, right? Like if your hip is dislocated, it's harder to walk. Life can do stuff like that to us and get us down to our knees, but we have to make that conscious decision that I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And this is a great example of how life threw Jacob a situation, and instead of Jacob to just be like, this man came out of nowhere, wrestled me until daybreak, but now this man's saying that he's gonna go, he doesn't want to wrestle me anymore, let me just let him go and call it a day. Jacob said, no, you came, you wrestled me until daybreak, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And that's how we ought to be in seasons of our lives. When we go through turmoil, when we go through hard times in our lives, a lot of us just be like, well, that was a season, now it's gone, now we move on. But you can't let life throw you curveball like that without saying, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And I think that just basically means I'm not going to let this season of my life go until I get recompense for it, until I get recompense for all the toiling, the struggling, and the hurt and the pain that I've been through. I'm not going to allow this season to pass me without taking nuggets from it. I'm not going to allow this season to pass me without learning from it. A lot of the times we let a season of financial hardship go through, and then once we have finances, all of a sudden we forget about that season. No, what did you learn about that season? What did you learn about your spending habits? What did you learn about your money habits? What did you learn in that season? What could you take away from that? Sometimes we lose all the relationships in our lives, or a relationship that meant a lot to us, and we think, okay, well, that wasn't meant to be, on to the next, or I'll just be single for now. No, what did you learn in that season of your life? And you have to tell those seasons, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And blessings are not always monetary things. They're not always materialistic things. Sometimes blessings is getting peace from a season where you thought you would never have peace again. Sometimes blessings are learning how to set boundaries in ways you've never been taught like before, so that when you get into your next relationship, it will never be a problem for you, right? So we have to get to a point where we say, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And that's how we have to also be with God. God loves when we're bold. He loves when we're upfront. He doesn't like when we shrink ourselves, right? And there's a difference between fearing God and walking in humility in his presence, and shrinking out of like low self-esteem and feeling unworthy. We're worthy because Jesus died on that cross to make us worthy. And as long as we acknowledge that truth, we can step before God boldly. We can step before the throne with all confidence in him, because we know how we were made. We were beautifully and wonderfully made. And so if you needed a sign to, before you move on from a hard season, or before you move on to a season that might have been confusing for you, you need to stay to that season. I'm not letting you go until you bless me. Write down what you learned, even if it's one thing. Write down what you could have done better. Write down what you did that you're proud of, but don't let that season go until it blesses you.